Today we'll be getting into the best rides over at Disneyland Resort in California. Hello and welcome to the Let's Go to Disney podcast. I'm Oliver.
And I'm Lucy.
Today is Sunday, April 27th, and you're listening to episode 85, Best Attractions at Disneyland Resort. Before we get into today's main topic, here's what's going on in the parks right now. Disney dropped some 2026 vacation package news this week. So they announced that for the entirety of 2026, children aged 3 to 9 will get a free dining package with the purchase of a regular price dining package. They also said that this offer will also be able to be combined with other select offers, which is actually a great deal because what you'll often find is that you won't be able to combine deals. They'll if you have a ticket deal, you won't be able to combine that with like a resort deal. But they've said specifically that this will be able to get combined with other select offers, which is that's really solid. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know we don't usually advocate for the dining plan, but when you're getting it for free for your kids, it can be worth to look at, especially, like I'm saying, if you can combine that with something else that can save you money, that can overall be a really great deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that note, the dining plan is getting a price increase for 2026. So for the quick service plan, adults, it'll be $60.47 per person per night. And for kids, it'll be $26.16 per person per night. And then the standard plan for adults will be $98.59 per person per night. And for kids, it'll be $31.94. So these are small increases, but they do add up, over several days and for several people. So again, you really have to crunch those numbers. For the vast majority of the people, the vast majority of the time, it's just not worth it. But again, when you factor in like free dining deals, then it can start to make sense.
Agreed. Disney also released their 2026 vacation packages, and as of this recording, you can book packages that include a resort hotel stay and tickets through October 31st of 2026. As always, we always recommend making your reservations as early as you know your travel dates, because this way you secure the resort you want. If further deals are released later, you can definitely apply those savings to your existing booking if it applies to your travel dates. Plus, you only need to make a $200 deposit and pay the rest as you go.
No, exactly. Because, that's what we did initially when we made this booking. We put our $200 deposit down I just settled, right?
Yep.
And we're leaving in just a couple weeks. So that's definitely a good way to do it.
Last week, we mentioned that the VI pass holder days were returning this year. We speculated that the offerings from last year would be returning, and for the most part, they are. The pass holder lounge will be in the restaurant Marrakesh, and that's going to be available from May 14th until July 13th. There will also be a 40% off dining at select restaurants from May 14th to June 30th, Mondays through Thursdays. So these savings will not be available Fridays through Sundays. These restaurants are Hollywood and Vine, Tusker House, Toledo, Boatwright's Dining Hall, and Cape May Cafe. And then from July 1st to 31st, it'll be the same savings Monday to Thursday at the Diamond Horseshoe, Whispering Canyon Cafe, Tiffin's, Coral Reef, and Ale and Compass. Pass holders will also get a 20% off discount on the Disney Store website from June 2nd till July 22nd.
Yeah, that's a solid savings if you want to get yourself some Disney merch. One thing I was curious about is that, Lucy and I are pass holders, but the kids aren't. And that's usually because we go at least once a year, just the two of us, and then we'll go with the kids. Anyways, long story short, I was chatting with a cast member just before we started recording here because I was wondering if we could take the kids into the pass holder lounge, with our annual passes, and the answer is a hard no. Okay? So if you were wondering that, if you're a pass holders and you want to bring in a friend who's not a pass holder, that's not going to fly.
Your kids don't count.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, we finally told the kids about our upcoming trip. And that we're leaving for in like 13 days, right? So we've been wanting to do, a short video. We've talked about that before. And essentially announcing this trip and our Universal Orlando and our Disney Wish cruise that's coming up later this year in November.
That's right.
And we finally did it this week. So I added some clips of, the Caribbean Beach Resort, Universal, and the Wish. And they were just floored. Actually, Caleb, our son, right? He couldn't believe it when we showed it to them. He was like, is that this year? Like, he's just this year? We're like, yeah, it's this year, man. It's like, and like our Disney trip is like less than 2 weeks away now. So he was super, super stoked. And we all are really.
Absolutely. The last time that they found out they were going to Disney, they had like triple digit wait time for themselves, right? So this is when we told them it was 15 days, right?
Yeah.
So literally 15 days. They have 2 weeks of school and then that's it for a week. And the weeks fly by. Usually we're so busy with activities and stuff. it'll be here before we know it.
No, for sure. And, needless to say, they're pumping, rightfully so, right?
So
they
excited.
can't wait. And frankly, neither can we, right?
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
super looking forward to this trip.
So our Lightning Lane booking window opens on Saturday. That's going to be 5 a.m. for us because we are 2 hours behind. So we'll be making our attack plan that we normally do up before so that we are ready to go when the booking opens. It's going to be a bit of a whirlwind in the days leading up, like I was saying, because baseball season for the kids is starting this week. Our daughter's dance competitions are wrapping up, and we're just trying to get our ducks in a row for this trip. So long story short, we all need this vacation. It's going to be a really good break for all of us.
Yeah, agreed 100%. So with that said, let's get into today's main topic. So this week we're switching it up a bit and we're heading over to the West Coast to talk about some of the best rides over at Disneyland in California. So if you're a Walt Disney World Resort regular, right, or if you visited the East Coast and you're kind of curious about how Disneyland stacks up, there's a few key similarities and important differences to be aware of. So they're both Disney resorts, right? And we mean resort here in the sense of like the property as a whole, right? Not like a resort hotel. So you have the parks, resort hotels, and a shopping and dining district at both coasts, right? You'll find a lot of the same or very similar attractions on both coasts, as well as some exclusive rides and experiences that are unique to the individual resorts.
The biggest difference between Walt Disney World and Disneyland, in our opinion, is the size and location as a whole. Disneyland is in the middle of Anaheim with urban sprawl in all directions on the outside of the resort's walls. It has 2 parks, 3 resort hotels, and then downtown Disney. Everything is walkable, meaning you can quickly get from park to park into downtown Disney. Nothing is so far away that you can't get there relatively quickly on foot. While Disney World, on the other hand, is massive. The resort property as a whole is the size of the city of San Francisco. There are 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, over 20 resort hotels, which includes Disney proper resorts and Good Neighbor hotels. Then there's Disney Springs, golf courses, mini golf, and an extensive transportation system that includes buses, monorails, boats, and a Skyliner, which is essentially a gondola system. And the parks are close, all things considered, but definitely not walkable.
Yeah.
You cannot walk from park to park except between Epcot and Hollywood Studios. And that's not like it's a quick jaunt either, like it is between Disneyland and California Adventure. It's still a good 30-minute or so, depending on how quickly you actually walk.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like that's the thing about Disneyland, right? Everything's compact. Everything's right there. It's like Universal Orlando as of right now, right? Meaning like you can walk everywhere.
Before Epic.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Disneyland, everything is super close. Disney World, everything's kind of sprawled out and you just have to plan a little bit more because it takes a little longer to get everywhere. And another key difference right now is that the Lightning Lane system is completely different. So when Genie Plus was revamped to the current Lightning Lane system, the changes hit both coasts, meaning Multipass, Single Pass, and Premier Pass exists both at Disneyland and Walt Disney World. The key difference here is that Disneyland's Lightning Lane Multipass still works exactly like Genie Plus used to work, which is much different than the existing Lightning Lane Multipass situation at Walt Disney World as of this recording. Without going into the nitty-gritty, the basics are that at Disneyland, you can purchase Multipass as an add-on to your ticket when you purchase, like your ticket package, or on the day of your visit on a day-to-day basis. So as you know, at Walt Disney World, you can purchase it at 7 days before your check-in day if you're staying on property, or 3 days before your first park day if you're staying off property. At Disneyland, you can make your first selection when you enter the park for the day, and once you use your next Lightning Lane, you'll be able to book another one, or when 2 hours have lapsed since your last booking, exactly how it used to work with Genie Plus. You remember the 120-minute rule?
I do, yeah.
If you ever use Genie Plus over in Walt Disney World, like that still works that way over in Disneyland. Whereas now in Walt Disney World, you can make 3 selections ahead of your trip, which are tiered at every park except Animal Kingdom. And this is when you purchase the service, right? So that's either 7 days or 3 days, depending on where you're staying. And when you're in the parks, you can only make your next selection when you've used one of your initial 3 and so on. There is no 2-hour rule, so that does not apply in any way, shape, or form, meaning you're never going to be able to hold more than 3. It's always a maximum of 3.
And then outside of this, the experiences are fairly similar overall. We know there are diehard fans of Disneyland and diehard fans of Walt Disney World, but generally speaking, both are great and both have unique offerings. So if you love Disney parks, you're going to find things to love on both coasts. For us, it's not one or the other, it's both. Now, we do have a very deep love for Walt Disney World, but this isn't throwing shade at Disneyland in any shape or form. We're just fully aware that without Disneyland, there would be no Disney World. Disneyland is the original, and it's the blueprint for every park to have been born since. It's the only park that Walt physically walked through, and it holds a special place in our hearts for that reason alone.
Yeah, agreed 100%. Now, with that little preamble out of the way, let's get into the best rides at both Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure, which are the 2 West Coast parks. So we'll kick things off at the OG park. So we've broken these down in categories, and we'll start with the best thrill coasters. So first up, we've got Indiana Jones's Adventure. So this attraction is located in Adventureland, not far from Jungle Cruise. It's not a traditional coaster in that the ride system is actually very similar to the dinosaur attraction over in Animal Kingdom, if you've ever ridden that. You board a 12-person ride vehicle, which is essentially like a truck, and then you head into the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. The scenes and sets in the attraction are actually really intricate and really well done, and you encounter all kinds of trouble, including a massive boulder. There are several indie audio animatronics in the ride and some cool effects as well, like lightning along the inner walls. I think it's like fiber optic. I'm not exactly sure how they did it, but it looks really cool. This is a fan favorite for good reason, right? It's fun and it's thrilling, and it's IP that a lot of people love, especially like, millennials or older parents.
Boomers.
And you're not going to find this in Walt Disney World either, right? So although we do know that Dinosaur Ride is being rethemed to Indiana Jones, Disney did say that it won't be a copy of Disneyland's version. So while the ride system will likely be very similar, read like pretty much the same, the story and ride-through experience are supposed to be very different. Note that if you have littles, this does have a 46-inch height requirement in Disneyland, which is quite a bit more than Walt Disney World's dinosaur attraction, which is only 40 inches.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is, but they must have a good reason.
Yeah. So next up is Space Mountain. So just like in Walt Disney World, this is located in Tomorrowland. But there's a couple of key differences between Disneyland's version and Walt Disney World's version. The ride vehicles are wider and they actually fit 2 guests side by side, whereas they're front to back on the East Coast. And the West Coast version is much smoother. Park guests who are used to riding Walt Disney World will notice the difference immediately, while Disneyland guests will be like, what the heck is going on here? Because you're being jostled every which way.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just one example of something that is definitely better in Disneyland over Disney World. The height requirement here is 40 inches, while the Walt Disney World is 44 inches. So again, quite a difference, and your littles will have to be significantly taller to ride Disney World's version.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's because, it is smoother
jostled?
or it's like side by side. Maybe like you're
Probably
closer to your parent. I don't know. And then next up over in Fantasyland is the Matterhorn bobsled. So this is part indoor, part outdoor coaster, and the ride vehicles are actually more similar to the Space Mountain ride vehicles in Disney World than the Space Mountain ride vehicles like in Disneyland.
Yeah.
This is more of a jerky coaster, again, similar to Walt Disney World's version of Space Mountain, and it's not overly thrilling and fast, but it does qualify for the category, although it's like on the lower end of the spectrum for sure. This has a 42-inch height requirement, and there's no equivalent in Walt Disney World, right? This is a ride that's unique to Disneyland proper.
Next up is the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which is located in the Frontierland. This is a family-friendly thrill coaster that is good in between graduating from that kiddie coaster for bigger and faster coasters. The rides on both coasts are pretty similar, save for a few minor differences that only most knowledgeable guests are actually going to recognize. Disney World's version's track is a touch longer, and the coaster is a bit faster as well. There is a dynamite blow-up effect in the Disneyland one that isn't found over in Walt Disney World, but that could be changing soon since it's down for refurbishment right now and not expected to open until 2026. We don't know exactly what's coming, but Disney did say it'll reopen with a bit of new magic, so we can only assume that there will be some fun new effects. Having said that, the track at Disneyland got a refurb in 2014, and it's noticeably been smoother since. The ride has a 40-inch height requirement on both coasts. This is definitely one of our family's favorites, and we wouldn't go to Disneyland or Magic Kingdom without riding it.
Yeah, no, it's a must.
Except for this time.
No, exactly. We can't ride it because it's closed. But yeah, absolutely. If we're going to a Disney park that has a Big Thunder, we're on it for sure.
Several times.
Yep. So next up is Tiana's Bayou Adventure. This is another attraction that is found on both coasts. In Disneyland, it's located in Bayou Country, and there is no equivalent land in Walt Disney World. It sits in Frontierland at Magic Kingdom. Both of these rides reopened recently after being rethemed from Splash Mountain. This is a flume water ride that features cutting-edge audio animatronics. That's like today, right? With the Tiana animatronics, they look really, really good. And the rides are very similar on both coasts. Full disclosure here, we actually haven't ridden Disneyland's version of Tiana's Bayou Adventure yet, but it's essentially the same ride as the old Splash Mountain with a new skin, right? Just like in Walt Disney World. Disneyland's ride vehicles are front to back, whereas they're side to side in Walt Disney World, and the ride is also smaller in Disneyland, and it features 3 drops to Walt Disney World's 5. Guests who have done both coasts report that this is actually good, as there's like less dead space in California, and the ride just seems to kind of flow better overall as a result. So yeah, that's interesting. And then guests also report that the Disneyland version gets you more wet, right? Which makes sense because that's how it was with, Old Splash Mountain. So that hasn't changed in the sense that the track has not changed, the vehicles have not changed. So it's really the same thing with the new skin. And this ride has a 40-inch height requirement on both coasts.
Our next category is classics. So these attractions are slow moving and have more of an emphasis on storytelling, animatronics, and then going back to the roots of Disney. First up, we've got Pirates of the Caribbean. This attraction is found on both coasts, but there are some significant differences between the two attractions. So first off, the attraction in Disneyland sits in the New Orleans Square. The facade of the attraction has New Orleans theming with pastel colors and wrought iron railings. The loading dock for the attraction is actually named Lafitte's Landing, and while the Disney World version has a Spanish fortress vibe and is named Castillo del Moro. The Disneyland version opened up in 1967, shortly after Walt passed away. But he was heavily involved in the project leading up to its opening. And when Walt Disney World opened in 1971, there wasn't a Pirates there. Disney didn't think that it would have the same appeal on the East Coast due to its proximity to the Caribbean. But guests were actually not happy about this at all. So Disney quickly pivoted and Pirates opened in Adventureland at Magic Kingdom in 1973. Disneyland's Pirates is almost twice as long and clocks in just over 15 minutes. Now, that's my kind of ride. I love a good long ride.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
While the Disney World's version is just over 8 minutes long. I don't think I knew that it was 8 minutes long.
Yeah, so it's pretty much like, twice as long in Disneyland.
I love that.
Yep.
The Disneyland version also has the Blue Bayou restaurant that overlooks parts of the attraction as well. It's a classic for a good reason. It's one of our favorites on both coasts, and this one does not have a height requirement, so it's family-friendly for guests of all ages.
Yeah, exactly. And next up, and this is probably my favorite classic attraction, and that's Haunted Mansion. So Disneyland's version opened in 1969, and Disney World's version opened with Magic Kingdom in 1971. So the attractions are very similar because they were actually being developed simultaneously, and most of the props and like the ride elements were duplicated for both attractions. But just like Pirates, there are some important differences, with the first being location. So Disneyland's version also sits in New Orleans Square, but there is no equivalent land right in Walt Disney World, so it sits in Liberty Square over there. Disneyland's facade is a southern mansion complete with like large white columns and wrought iron railings, whereas Walt Disney World's version has kind of northeastern type influence, right, in Liberty Square, and it's a Dutch-style colonial mansion. The stretching room is also different, right? So in the sense that in California, it's actually an elevator, and it physically takes guests down, right? It actually moves guests down, and this is to the loading area, right? Because Haunted Mansion didn't fit inside the park, and the ride building was actually built out, so Imagineers needed a way to get guests, to the attraction, right? So whereas in Florida, space was never an issue, right? So the ceiling rises, but the guests don't actually move. So when, the doors open, you just, go to the loading area. There was never a space issue
You're
there.
never
right?
going down there.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's also been some recent changes in the last little bit as well. So Disney World got the Hatbox Ghost, which they never had before. And Disneyland is getting a new gift shop and an expanded queue, which they never had before. So any way you slice it, this is one of, if not our favorite of the classic attractions.
Next up, we've got Jungle Cruise. This was an opening day attraction for both parks, so 1955 for Disneyland and 1971 for Walt Disney World. Walt's original vision for Jungle Cruise would have real animals, but the feasibility of that fizzled quickly and audio animatronics would make up the attraction. Initially, the ride was informative, and the skipper's script kept to an informational and educational format. But this became pretty stale, and skippers started adding humor to the script to spice things up. Walt found out and actually loved it, and the rest is history. So the ride on both coasts have received updates over the years, and now it also gets a seasonal overlay when it becomes Jingle Cruise. Aside from that, the attraction is very, very similar on both coasts, and the ride experience is pretty interchangeable. Of course, you've always got slightly different experiences with different skippers. Even just in the same park, you'll have a different experience each time,
totally.
right?
You can ride it back to back, get a different skipper, and right. Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Like their jokes are similar, but the way they tell them is different.
Yep,
so yeah.
Totally.
The ride is located in Adventureland on both coasts, and it does not have a height requirement.
And last for the classic attractions are the railroads, right? So Disneyland has a railroad. It's the Disneyland Railroad, right? And Walt loved trains. So the entrance to Disneyland is a train station. And so, of course, there had to be a train at the park. The railroad takes you on an 18-minute journey around the park, and you can hop on or off at any of the 4 stations, which are Main Street USA, New Orleans Square, Mickey's Toontown, and Tomorrowland. Of course, you have an equivalent in Magic Kingdom, right, whose entrance is also at Strange Station, and this is the Walt Disney World Railroad. This takes you on a 20-minute or 1.5-mile journey around the park, which has stops at Main Street USA, Frontierland, and Storybook Circus, back there in Fantasyland. This is a classic on both coasts and a must-do in our opinion.
Absolutely. Next category are rides that are unique to Disneyland and are not found in Walt Disney World. And first up, we've got Alice in Wonderland. This attraction originally opened in 1958, and in the years since, it received some updates in 1984, and then most recently in 2014. This attraction has you board a giant caterpillar car. It's an indoor dark ride that features a mix of screen, scenes, and animatronics. The ride has no height requirements, so it's suitable for guests of all ages. This is part of what we would call that core, more classic dark attractions in Fantasyland. If you're visiting for the first time, it's worth doing some of these types of rides in Fantasyland.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. Next up, we've got Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. So this is another dark Fantasyland ride, and it's been around since the park first opened in 1955. And it received a significant update in 1983 with the Fantasyland update. Walt Disney World had a version of the attraction that opened with Magic Kingdom in 1971, but the attraction closed in 1998 and was replaced by The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and that still remains to this day, right? That's the ride that's currently there. This is a dark coaster, like we said, and that features sets and scenes from the 1940s film The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And this ride is a little chaotic, right? Not in a thrilling sense, but there's a lot going on from scene to scene. It's a classic and kind of a rite of passage for Disneyland guests, and it does not have a height requirement.
And then still in Fantasyland is Pinocchio's Daring Journey. This is another dark ride attraction, and it opened with Fantasyland updates in 1983. The attraction has you board a cart and takes you through scenes inspired by the film. The ride features scenes and sets with animatronic figures, and it's a slow-moving dark ride, again, with an emphasis on story, not thrills. This one also does not have a height requirement.
Yeah, and the last that we'll mention of the Dark Fantasyland rides is Snow White's Enchanted Wish. So this one's got a history, right? So it opened in 1955 as Snow White and Her Adventures before receiving an overhaul with the 1983 Fantasyland update when it reopened as Snow White's Scary Adventures. And that was the case until 2020. It got a refurb again and it reopened in 2021 in its current form. So a version of this attraction actually also operated in Magic Kingdom from 71 to 1994, where it was similar to Peter Pan's Flight at the time, right? Which is that Snow White didn't actually appear anywhere in the attraction because you were experiencing the ride through her eyes, right? Which left guests confused. They were well, why? It's Snow White's ride. Where is she, right? So that was updated in 1994 to Snow White's Scary Adventures, and it remained that way until 2012. It was scrapped completely then to make way for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, which is now the headliner in Fantasyland over in Walt Disney World. The Disneyland version, though, remains to this day, and it's a slow, dark ride, not unlike others we've mentioned in Fantasyland, right? And it loosely follows the story in the film, and it also doesn't have a height requirement. It is a classic, even though it's much different than the initial version, and it's definitely worth checking out if you're making your kind of rounds of Fantasyland.
Yeah, absolutely. Any of the rides that were there on opening day just kind of are special because Walt saw them, he rode them.
Exactly, right? And we know they're all different because they've all received, updates since the 50s, right? But still,
they're still the originals.
Exactly.
All right, moving away from the dark rides, but still in Fantasyland, you're going to find the Storybook Land Canal boats. This is a leisure open-air boat ride attraction that takes you around miniature model lands and castles from classic Disney stories. You're going to find Arendelle and Elsa's ice castle from Frozen, a scene of London from Peter Pan, the Alpine Village from Pinocchio, Cinderella Castle, among many others. It's a nice, relaxing boat ride, and it's definitely worth doing. Again, there's no height requirement for this one.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lovely ride.
Yeah.
And then the last one we'll mention here, and it doesn't really belong in any of the categories we've mentioned so far, and that's Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Now, this is pretty much a carbon copy of the attraction over in Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World, but it's located in Mickey's Toontown.
Such a perfect spot for it.
Yeah, exactly, right? So the queue here is what makes it way different, and it's themed heavily to Mickey and Minnie, and we find that it just fits in more organically in Disneyland than it does over in Hollywood Studios, right? Where it sits in the Chinese Grauman's Theater replica over there.
And the Chinese Grauman's Theater was the perfect spot for the
Great Movie Ride.
Ride. That one made a lot of sense.
Agreed. Yeah.
Not that I love Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, so I'm happy it's there.
Agreed.
But yes, the Great Movie Ride made more sense there.
Agreed. Yeah, totally. And then before switching to California Adventure here, you may be wondering why we didn't mention rides like, Rise of the Resistance and Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. And that's because Galaxy's Edge and these rides are pretty much the exact same than what you're going to find in Walt Disney World and our version of Galaxy's Edge, right? So, if you're going to do a Disneyland trip, we fully expect that you're going to ride these. But if you were doing a Walt Disney World trip, they're essentially the same.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to be park hopping over to Disney's California Adventure. This park opened in February of 2001, and I actually visited it with my parents in March of 2001, a month after it opened. And let me tell you, it has changed in major ways since then. I bet you over half of the stuff is not even the same, if not more.
Yep.
So if you've ever watched the Imagineering story on Disney Plus, you kind of know that there were some missteps with the opening of the park initially, and it really comes into its own in the last couple of decades and has some stellar attractions. So let's kick things off with the thrill attractions, and we're going to start with Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. So this used to be Tower of Terror, but it actually received a retheme in 2017. Initially, this caused some serious backlash, but like all things, once guests started experiencing Mission Breakout, they fell in love with it completely, and then the rest is history. The current iteration of the attraction is still a drop ride, so that hasn't changed, but the theming is now Guardians of the Galaxy. It has different drop sequences that coincide with different songs, which are I Want You Back by the Jackson 5, Hit Me With Your Best Shot by Pat Benatar, Give Up the Funk by Parliament, Free Ride by the Edgar Winter Group, Burn in Love by Elvis Presley, and Born to Be Wild by Steppenwolf. This is a seriously fun attraction, and we kind of love that we still have the original in Hollywood Studios and then something completely different in Disneyland. It also gets a really fun seasonal overlay at Halloween, where after 3 p.m., it actually becomes Guardians of the Galaxy Monsters After Dark. It's thrilling to say the least, and just like its previous version, it has a 40-inch height requirement.
Yeah, exactly. And the rotating song, selection. It reminds me of our Guardians Cosmic Rewind back home, right?
Exactly.
Which is awesome because it gives you kind of a different experience every single time you ride it.
Every single time, yeah. And those are some fun songs, too.
Yeah, exactly. And next up is Incredicoaster. So this is an outdoor thrill coaster themed to the Incredibles. When you imagine a roller coaster, this is probably what comes to mind, right? It's classic in that sense. It has a series of tunnels with animatronic characters from the movie like Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl. It's fast, it's thrilling, it's kind of a no-nonsense, type of coaster and experience for sure. It does have a high height requirement at 48 inches, so your really little ones won't be able to ride this one, but if you're tall enough, your older kids are certainly going to appreciate the speed on this one. This actually replaced California Screamin' in 2018, which was an opening day attraction for this park.
I do remember that one being on there. My dad refused to go on it, but my mom and my sister and I did.
Yeah, and how was it?
It was fun. I remember it being really fun.
Yeah.
So next up is Radiator Springs Racers. This opened with Cars Land back in 2012, and it is such a well-themed land as a whole, and this is the flagship attraction to that land. The ride vehicle and system is reminiscent of Test Track. The cars are themed to the cars from the movie, complete with the big eyes. You go through various indoor scenes and then massive Cars animatronics like Mater, the cow trucks, Luigi from Luigi's Tire, among many others. The ride finishes with the outdoor race with one of the other ride vehicles. It's a really well done attraction in that it has great theming and the thrills all in one, and it's wildly popular for that reason. This is a Lightning Lane single pass for that park, and it has a 40-inch height requirement. It's a must-do for any guests for sure.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. Our next category for California Adventure is family-friendly. And the first on our list is Toy Story Midway Mania. So if you've ever ridden the Disney World version, this is pretty much the exact same thing. So they both opened in their respective coasts in 2008. The premise is you have 3D glasses and you and your partner have a cannon with a string that you pull to fire. Your ride vehicle is going to come to various screens where you're going to shoot different projectile at different targets themed to Toy Story. This is fun for the whole family, and it always gets kind of the competitive juices flowing, right? And it's one of our son Caleb's absolute favorite rides. It does not have a height requirement, so it's good for pretty much everybody.
Yeah, we're literally always coming off the ride being like, what'd you get? What'd you get? And our poor daughter Sophia is just like, I didn't do very well.
Yeah, she might do better this time. She's getting older each time. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Next up is Web Slingers, a Spider-Man adventure. This is another shooter type attraction, not unlike Toy Story Midway Mania, except it's fully interactive in the sense that you don't have a cannon or a blaster or anything like that. Your hand becomes your weapon. You have a pre-show with Tom Holland as Spider-Man that explains how this works, and then you board your ride vehicle. You pop on your 3D glasses, and away you go. You use your hand to flick your wrist with your 2 middle fingers down, just like Spider-Man would, and then you destroy spider bots during different scenes. Different colored bots have different point values. This is another fun family ride that your kids are certainly going to love, especially if they love video games. And then this one does not have a height requirement.
Next up, we call this a family-friendly attraction, but it's certainly a classic as well, and this is Soarin'. So it was originally Soarin' over California, which will come back during different times of year on both coasts, right? But most of the time, for most of the year, it's Soarin' around the world. This is a very leisure attraction that just hits all the right notes, right? It's not thrilling, it's not overly themed, it's just fun and relaxing, and we love this one, and so do the kids. It's always worth doing whether you're in Disneyland or Walt Disney World. It is family-friendly, but it does have a small, well, it's not that small, it's 40-inch height requirement. So your very, very little kids won't be able to ride it, but most, like, I'd say probably from around 5 or 6, they should be good to ride this one.
And last but certainly not least is an honorable mention, and that's Pixar Pal Around. This is the massive Ferris wheel with Mickey's face on it. You cannot miss it. So this actually could be classified as a thrill ride because they have sliding gondolas that have a serious vomit factor to them. So if this is not your thing, which we totally get, you can board the fixed gondolas for a much more relaxed ride that gives you great views. Either way, it's iconic for this park and it's definitely worth doing. I still remember we didn't know that some of them moved. We got on the moving one. My dad hates heights. He was so angry the whole time. I've never seen him so angry. And there was a little family with us because they will throw, if it's busy, they'll throw other families. People, The kid was freaking out from the other family. And my dad was just like,
get me off this thing.
Get me off. I can't do. Oh my God. And we were laughing and we shouldn't have been, but it was hilarious.
That's funny.
Like I said, though, it's super iconic to the park. It's definitely worth doing. There are several other attractions in this park that you shouldn't be overlooked, but these are the standouts in our opinion. I do like the Grizzly Run. That's a good one.
It gets you soaked is the problem.
It does. It's
like Holly River Rapids in that sense. You're getting definitely getting wet. So realistically, if you've never visited a Disney park like at all, you can't go wrong with either coast, right? You're going to have a blast regardless. If you're a Walt Disney World regular, right, and you want to head west to see what it's all about, you're likely going to love it as well. So it's familiar enough that, you're going to feel the similarities like immediately, but it's different enough that it's a fresh experience and it's going to be something completely new for you. So there are many, many things to do that are unique to the original park, and it's worth visiting for that reason alone. One of the things that I really want to do probably on our next Disneyland trip is it's not Keys to the Kingdom. It's their version of essentially like the Main Street tour, walking tour. I forget what it's called. Anyways, I'll have to look it up, but I want to do that. Yeah. It's much shorter. I think it's only 90 minutes long, but just to get, just to walk through and get cast members' insight into some of the secrets, right?
Absolutely.
So with that said, thank you for joining us today to talk Disneyland attractions. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And as always, if you could leave us a rating and review, it would be greatly appreciated. If you choose to do so, you can leave reviews right on Apple Podcasts. And for Spotify, you can leave a rating.
You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at letsgo.to-Disney, as well as on our Facebook page, Let's Go to Disney. We share some helpful reels here as well as some fun ones. The link tree in the show notes will take you to all of our socials.
Have a great day and we'll see you real soon.